Thank you. So Christian gave us his biography that he's an ethical culture leader, community educator, photographer, documentarian, primarily concerned with examining the human condition. He's also a dear friend. There's so much more to your biography, Christian. I met you years ago when you were at the Philadelphia Society and a leader in training, and then a friend of my daughter Emily's, because you were both leaders in Future Ethical Society. So I really appreciated that. So anyway, it's just a delight to welcome you back here. So Christian, come on up.
Every time I come to BSEC, it's always like I get to say that it feels good to be home, even though when I'm in Philly, I talk a lot of trash about New York. If to have it up. Okay. So no offense. I I respect the trade-offs and the quality of life challenges that come with trying to be a New Yorker and maintaining New Yorker identity. So I appreciate you all. And I appreciate being here because it also reminds me when I tell other unintentional but real lies, like when I start this talk, I talk about like maybe every single talk platform that I've given, I kind of assign this, what's the word I want to say, importance to, or sort of rebirth of myself and finding myself to 10 years ago going to the Humanist Service Corps and spending a year in Ghana. And I kind of say, this kind of talk begins there because that's when the first time I really learned another language I was trying to speak. But this time, that really is a lie because this talk really is the roots of this talk and the roots of my relationship with Haiti and Haitians and the Creole language begins here in Brooklyn, begins in my childhood where so many of the people close to me, so many of the crushes that I had, so many of my formative experience as a young person involved folks who were from Haiti or of Haitian descent. And I could list some, my best friend from college, one of my best friends from college, who we didn't know each other while we lived in New York, but we arrived in Ohio, and we instantly hit it off because we were both New Yorkers in this strange small town in Ohio trying to go to college. But also through the years, we were going on these adventures together, and he took me up to Montreal, my first time going to Montreal, to visit his aunt and cousins. And that is where I first encountered Creole as a language that I could, kind of be like, oh, there's something going on here, right? And there was one word I learned from that journey, and that was manger, which means food or eat. And I giggle a little bit inside because food is so important to Haitian culture, to Haitian people, that would be a word that I pulled out is not surprising. But really, this talk and sort of, my relationship and my kind of almost, I wouldn't call it an obsession, a positive obsession maybe, but it also began with this book, The Black Jacobins, which was I read in college and one of my favorite books that I ever read, that talks about the kind of assigning a Marxist lens to how the Haitian Revolution happened and what was going on. And so those kind of things, mixed in, and then kind of the language part was later as I came back from Ghana and was interested in learning, okay, what's the second most spoken language in this community? Or what's the language that I really wanted to learn because I wanted to connect with people across the African diaspora, French. And then Spanish was the first one, thinking of the probably second most spoken language in the U.S. And then there was this little sort of itch inside of me to learn Creole. And I met a person, her name is Melissa, who's a Haitian poet and cultural worker. And she became my first Haitian Creole teacher. And this was really special to me because how we met was very in a West Philly communal way, which we were at an event and we just began talking. And I told her, I said, I really want to learn Creole. And this is before the pandemic, so we were actually in person. And we were in a meeting space. And she was like, do it. And I was like, it's silly. I'm not Haitian. Why would I learn Creole? Why would I learn this language that is so private, so important, so intimate, right, as this outsider? But something wouldn't let it go. And I told her that, and she encouraged me, and she helped me along. And through that meeting, I engaged with other people because I would try to speak Creole to the other people I knew in Philly, which doesn't have as large of a Haitian community as New York. But as you'll find, is that Haitians are everywhere. And there are so many people that I've met in Philly that are also of Haitian descent, that who have become really good friends and comrades and community members and collaborators. So I kind of called that feeling that I had to learn Creole something that was deep inside of me. I said it was kind of like my ancestors wouldn't let me release it. And it reminds me of this poem that in my exploration of Creole that I found, and that kind of sums up this feeling. It's called Sometimes I'm Not Myself by Felix Mauricio Leroy. Sometimes I'm not myself. There's a wild luau dancing in my head, a sorrowful luau which stamps on the ground. When it's like that, I am not myself. There's a huge drum beating in my heart. A marvelous voodoo is dancing in my body. And when it's like that, I can't say darling. It's comrade, friend, I call you. If you take hold of my hand, there's luau of revolution that's boiling in my blood. My horse is saddled. I'm set to go. A lambi of revolution is sounding. If you've the courage, take my hand. My horse is saddled. Let's go. So, learning about Creole, seeing how it's different from French as a language and how calling it a broken French is just wildly not appropriate, because it sort of dawned on me that what I thought was Creole in terms of how I would describe it was a way of Creole, how it functioned as a sort of tool for revolution. In the sense that Creole isn't meant to be uninterpretable because it's a puzzle, but rather it was meant to be uninterpretable by people who thought the speaker was less than human. And so in that, learning about the Haitian Revolution and seeing the way that the language, the development of the language, the development of culture aided in the liberation of a people, it just brings me great inspiration. So if we think about Haiti, what was Haiti? Haiti was called the Pearl of the Antilles for France, which produced more wealth than any of its colonies outside. 2 years before the revolution, and the Haitian Revolution, so it is according to documents. Now at that point, 2/3 of the 500,000 slaves in Haiti were newly arrived. I want to read this portion. So as the kind of revolution begins in 1989, right, the picture of like, not only are there a lot more slaves than there are colonists and freed people, but these are also very new people who are very recently enslaved. The insurgents had developed a method of attack based on their overwhelming numerical superiority. They did not rush forward in mass formation like fanatics. They placed themselves in groups, choosing wooded spots in such a way to envelop their enemy, seeking to crush him by the weight of numbers. They carried out these preliminary maneuvers in dead silence, where their priests, the black ones, chanted the wanga, and the women and the children sang and danced in a frenzy. When these had reached the necessary height of excitement, the fighters attacked. If they met with resistance, they retired without exhausting themselves. But at the slightest hesitation, In the defense, they became extremely bold and rushing up to the cannon, swarmed all over their opponents. At first, they couldn't even use the guns they captured and used to apply the match at the wrong end. It was from these men unable to speak 2 words of French that an army had to be made. And so the Black Jacket Myths by C.L.R. James kind of talks about these kind of various moments of the kind of both the development of these people who were newly here into kind of an identity and formation, as well as kind of the sort of political wrangling between these different classes. If you, in that quote from Amani Perry, where they talked about the jeunes de couleur, which is the kind of mixed race people who, you know, had some power, also owned slaves, but did not have as many rights as the colonists and white French folks in Haiti. So I kind of point to these moments and kind of want to highlight this feeling, this idea, and this kind of almost revolving orientation around what's happening inside. What are people listening to? What are people kind of using for encouragement, inspiration? It makes me think of another story relayed through here about Boukman, an enslaved Muslim who led the ceremony deep in the forest that is said to be the place where the decision to start the Haitian Revolution formed. Right? He said a prayer in Creole. The God who created the sun, which gives light, who rouses the waves and rules the storm, though hidden in the clouds, watches us. He sees all that the white man inspires him with crime, but our God calls upon us to do good works. Our God, who is good to us, orders us to revenge our wrongs. He will direct our arms and aid us. Throw away the symbol of the God of the whites, who has so often caused us to weep, and listen to the voice of liberty, which speaks in the hearts of us all. Now, if there's a problem with this talk or me in general, or maybe just some of my reticence in discussing voodoo, and not because I have anything against voodoo, but it's a topic I'm not super well versed in. But voodoo comes into the story in many ways, right? The first in the ceremony, it's a voodoo ceremony, right, where they do a ritual, right, which gives them the sign to begin the war. And this is important because what I'm talking about, what I'm getting at, is the retentions of folks who have come from Africa, and their respective cultures, wide range, right? Folks from different, would have been countries, but tribes, right? Identities, right? Theologies, various. And the kind of mixing of them together, the figuring out, right? The syncretism also of placing and sort of substituting their gods, deities, right, onto Catholic ones, right, to fit in or to hide, right? Things that happen around the diaspora. And so if I say this to say that I'm going to say it now to give myself a reminder that next week on Friday, there's going to be an opera that is written by a friend of mine, who another friend of mine is also performing in, that actually looks at the Constitution and the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution, sort of beginning documents, formations, ideas in Creole of Haiti, and also looking at the prism of them through voodoo. And so I just wanted to mention that because I'm going to come back and tell you who they are. And I'll send a link to whoever's hosting the Zoom so that folks can also see the ticket. But it would be a very interesting way to continue this conversation, this talk. The story, so this sort of interest in Creoles did not kind of stop at Haiti, but rather continued and kind of left me kind of looking for how do people handle those retentions? How do those look in different contexts, in different what would be countries? in different languages. So it took me to Colombia and a place called Palenque. Palenque was formed in the 1600s when people brought to the coast city of Cartagena, absconded into the deep interior of the forest, and they created little settlements called Palenques. And here, the only Spanish-based Creole that remains in South America was born. And today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And if you go there, they proudly express their African roots. Call themselves Congo. You see in murals along different houses in the, I guess you'd call it town, right? The different words, what it means in Spanish and versus in their language. It is also, it is known as the first free settlement for Africans in the Western Hemisphere. And I remember going, and it's a tourist site. So when you go to a place that is based in tourism economy, so people, have an interest in talking to you and greeting you and trying to get you to buy things. But I wanted to go back because I wanted to continue this investigation, which I've been inspired to go on as a result of my connection to Haiti. And so I went back after my first initial trip to stay for a couple of days. And I think around when I stayed there for the first night, they were like, "Oh, you're still here. You didn't leave." I think it was a sense of recognition, and they would start calling me Marron, right, which is a kind of the pronunciation in their language, a Spanish-esque accent of maroon. And that term maroon was used to also describe folks in Haiti who were attacking from the forest, as well as folks in Jamaica who were fighting for freedom in their time. And it also reminds me of folks here in what some would call the southeastern United States. So I'm thinking Florida up to Georgia, South Carolina. And I'm thinking of the Gullah Geechee, which on because of the build of, or the sort of design of chattel slavery in these areas, particularly South Carolina, there's a very swampy place. So on these plantations, there were not many overseers. And so you had a lot of slaves, a lot of folks who were enslaved, but very few people kind of in charge of them. So which allowed for the sort of fostering of these different retentions, the things for a certain kind of mixing, a certain kind of practicing and passing on of different cultural aspects. So what is interesting about the Gullah Geechee is also, so it is our kind of national, what I would say, treasure, because it is a Creole that is English-based, but also includes mixtures of words from the various folks who came to make up the African American population, but from their particular places. So whereas Haitian Creole has a lot of words from Fong, which is in Benin, or sort of the language structure is reminiscent of Fong, and other Bantu languages, and also as far as Palenque also has relationships to Bantu languages. Sort of when linguists look at Gullah Geechee, the language that the Gullah Geechee speak, they find that they have words and or sort of phrases or sort of structures that are reminiscent of Sierra Leone and other places along West Africa. So something struck me about the similarities between these stories, right? There's a sort of, in all of these places where language is formed, there's a collaboration between the land and the people. As if robbed from their home, they try to make, or if they're able to make, this proximal replacement where you can kind of live with nature. The second is the role of having large numbers of people, large numbers of enslaved people who were there and also maybe newly arrived, who maybe are able to kind of keep alive and inject some of these things so that they kind of remain, so that they're not forgotten. And the third is the language itself, right? And one of the thoughts of language, or the development of language, is that as things stay, right, some things have to disappear, and some things are forgotten. But all of this in the process is creating a new tongue, and in a sense also a new people out of many people. So I think of this, what some people will call creolization, as a process, dare I say, ethical process, and as something that I've been, in the travels that I'm making, was kind of trying to dream up of a kind of poem, a kind of way of talking about that process. And I wanted that poem to sound like a song. And I was going to say earlier that I didn't read the earlier poem in Creole because I wasn't warmed up yet, so I didn't want to make you all suffer, including John, right? But I'm ready now, I think, right? And so there's a song, or sort of Haitian standard, called Na Fong Bois, right? Mwen kone yo kote jouk nan bois, yon kote si ou ale ou a reme. Mwen kone yon kote nan fon bois, yon kote si ou ale ou a rete. I know a place deep in the woods, a place where if you go, you will love it. I know a place that goes to the woods, a place where if you go there, you will love it. Genyen lo, genyen rive koule, genyen fle, genyen bel moon, genyen danse, yan volu, ak tambu, genyen fle, genyen fle. It has gold, it has rivers that flow, it has flowers, it has beautiful people, it has yan volu and drums, it has flowers, it has flowers. And so again, thinking of this relationship to the land as like the running away into the woods, right? The invitation to the woods to experience beauty as an escape from the reality of what's happening outside of the woods, in quote unquote reality. And so in this way, I wanted to kind of try to bring these Creoles in conversation with each other. And so this is like, as I mentioned, I'm working on a documentary, or a finished documentary, but this is kind of my next piece that I'm kind of trying to figure out how to assemble, where I want to translate this poem into 3 different languages: Haitian Creole, Gullah Geechee, and Palenquero. And for it to thread the movie in these images of these folks from these places interacting with the land. And this is the kind of poem the last time I visited Haiti in 2024 that I wrote as I was meeting with artists and folks who were helping me dream up this in a certain kind of way. I am composed of each tongue that came before me. I am the result of 1,000 attempts at freedom. I am the ending and beginning of a continuous process, the culmination of 1,000 dreams, the heard warnings of 1,000 nightmares. To trace back the steps, to unwind the tongues, I would unravel into 1,000 pieces. An ocean midwifed us, traversing along a water, holding a strange balance. The place where we died, and the place where we would always seek to return. Because those waters fed the places we hid, they carried the others who would become us, a new people, again and again. And each time we were broken with commands, we took the bare threads and reworked them, remixed them into a weapon of the tongue. Where we lived and thrived held infinite possibilities, but we oriented around one another, re-spoke the words of our new elders, passed them to our children, carved out an island of possibility, a thing master would never understand. The day they let us speak in what they called broken was their first mistake, because Fong warriors left a mark, because Mandinka warriors spawned anew, because Bantu griots became immortal. Why did the depth of the forest hold us? What were we meant to hold? A maroon became a symbol, a maroon became a weapon, a maroon became a shapeshifter. Pathways braided in your hair, stars barbered into your scalp, reminders of what we carried here from there. Each word carries a world. The world a land, building and destroying, creating anew. How do I say I love you now? How do I say my name is? How do I begin again and again? Hold me for another generation. Who knows what new me will be birthed? Who knows what new star will rise? Who knows? Don't forget me when it's time to change again. Swallow me into the new world you create. Remember to trace the quips, the jokes at the roadside. Remember to trace the scars of my heartbreak. Remember to. I think there's something, I ask myself, why am I so interested in this journey? What am I trying to discover or understand or learn? And I think it's maybe my way of dealing with an idea that the last 400, 500, or 600 years could not have been just a severing and a trauma, but also something parallel was happening. In the sense that I think kind of like the Earth, to say that like the Pangea like broke up and now the continents are kind of coming back together, maybe, that actually the circle is for those people who separated and kind of distant and created anew, come into contact, into relationship again with the places where their ancestors came from. So we talk about Gullah Geechee and Sierra Leone, and Pelenkero, Kikongo, Haitian, Creole, and Fung. Even though those languages are made them more than those sort of just simple equations, but the sort of idea, it kind of, it's like an inspiration. It's like a thing. How do you foster that? How do you create that? It's something that I am constantly thinking about. And there's a Gullah Geechee proverb, which Gullah Geechee is the one I've not tried to study at all yet, but I bought books on it when I went to South Carolina. So, but if there's a proverb that says, if he ain't know where he done come from, he ain't gonna know where he gonna go. He going. And so I think about that, and I'll just kind of, I'll share this last poem because I feel like you probably poemed out, but I say that, which is also kind of funny. That second poem that was read, if you notice, and I think some people notice, if you read it in between the lines, there's a different line. So it's kind of a self-reference to kind of, I think, what Creole does, which is if you listen to it straight, you won't understand, but there's a poetry inside of it. Some people say Haitian Creole is simple, but I think it's actually one of the most poetic and complex languages I've ever studied. There's ways that people, that certain words can be used, for instance, like head. Like if you say someone looks like another person, say coupe tête. Jean, c'est vrai? Okay, right? Couper tête, which means that you could cut off his head and then put the other person's head, and it would be like the same person. It would look the same. Tête coupée. I switched it. Tête coupée. Right. Which I think it's a perfect encapsulation of Haitian Creole. Some people just say Haitian. They just call the language of Creole Haitian Creole Haitian. But I want to read this poem because I think it speaks to the dream of seeing the reconnection or the recognition. I meet a pretty girl, and every time I want to take her to Benin, fever-pitched dreams of dinner dates discussing Dessalines, discourse high on the hog, because my black high priestess just got my tongue wet. I got a family of Negroes I never met, dispersed, adverse, too far to traverse. So with my hand on her thigh, my heart on standby, I can look her in the eye and continue and say, Tishu, do you hear you? In syntax, grammar, and elision, and rhythm too. Est-ce que vous entendez-nous? So there were some references here. Dessalines was the first leader of the Free Republic of Haiti. And he actually, his kind of, he was trained by a Dahomey warrior who was a woman from what would become Benin, the state of Benin. And the high priestess is referring to voodoo. But the last line is that going back to that question of recognition of est-ce que vous entendez-nous? It's the saying, do you hear you all? But nous also means us. So do you hear us? And right, so in that sense, it's like the hope of being recognized, being able to cross the disconnection, the trauma that was the transatlantic slave trade. So as I kind of, I was invited here on the 100th. So as you see, May 17th is a really interesting day, right? Because not only is it have a special meaning in ethical culture, but May 18th is Flag Day. Drapeau, right, where the Haitians celebrate, and that quote kind of references why that holiday exists from Imani Perry. But also, at the time of ethical culture's birth, 150 years ago, this nation, in a sense, was being reborn again. After the Civil War, right, was Reconstruction. And we know in 1876, there's an important thing that happens in reference to Reconstruction. It's that there is a contested presidential election. And part of the deal to resolve that contested election was that the troops from the North would leave, leaving the project of Reconstruction unfinished. And in a sense, the nation that we're dealing with is a nation that never finished Reconstruction. In some sense, ethical culture exists because there were problems that were created as a result of Reconstruction not being finished. It's not lost on me that one of Felix Adler's core memories of the only time he says he saw his father cry was at the news of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So I have this very firm belief that all these dates and these occurrences are not random. Rather, there's some relationship. And when I give this talk in other places, it's usually called Maroonage, because I wanted to try to isolate and figure out the physical, philosophical, and ethical position of what it means to be a Maroon. The formation of an alternative space, or rather alternative being, to what is the reality now. Because what is this reality now? What does it mean to be a citizen of this country? from where is it possible to resist, to reassemble? What does it mean to be theistically and philosophically a Maroon? Not isolated, but a refuge. Not disconnected, but intentionally tooling over new concepts and new ideas of oneself. There are Maroons among us, people who are doing the work of resisting and retreating, restoring and recreating, reimagining. We have to determine if we, as people, as spaces, will be the bois, the woods, the forest, the swamp. Whether the containers of our relationship will be strong enough to hold what will be needed in order to resist. Whether the spaces that we will have will be the shield of cover for those who resist, and the laboratory where the world we will have tomorrow will be conjured up. Thank you. Oh, wow. Okay. All right.